Today, I want to tell you about my uncle. He was one of my father's closest friends, and our families have always been connected. For privacy reasons, I won't mention his name. I've known him since childhood, and his family has a long history of spiritual practices. They come from a lineage of scholars and spiritual leaders. It is said that 7 or 8 generations ago, one of his ancestors practiced intense meditation and recited sacred verses, eventually gaining control over 1 or 2 spirits. Over time, these spirits became attached to their family out of respect, learning religious teachings from them. This tradition continued down the generations until it reached my uncle's father. He was a well-respected spiritual healer who helped people with their problems through prayers and spiritual remedies. However, my uncle saw how much this affected his father. His health suffered, his financial situation deteriorated, and their family life was often disrupted. From a young age, my uncle decided that if the responsibility ever came to him, he wouldn't continue it. He may have discussed this with his father, who explained that while some spirits were under their control, others remained out of respect and could not be dismissed easily. They would choose a successor themselves, and it wasn't necessarily the eldest son. It could be anyone in the family. However, his father believed that my uncle would inherit this spiritual connection. My uncle wanted no part of it. Then, unexpectedly, his father passed away in a road accident. His funeral took place in the afternoon, and after the burial, everyone left except my uncle and his uncle, his father's brother. They remained by the grave, reciting prayers. His uncle, who also had some spiritual insight, suddenly noticed something. A few feet away near a tree, figures began emerging, 40 to 45 tall, heavily built men, all dressed in traditional garments with long beards. They walked slowly from behind the tree and gathered around the grave. My uncle was deep in prayer and didn't immediately grasp what was happening. But his uncle, recognizing the situation, subtly nudged him and whispered that these were not ordinary people. Among the figures, an elderly man stepped forward. He raised his hands in prayer, signaling my uncle and his uncle to do the same. The way he recited the prayer was unlike anything my uncle had ever heard. His voice was mesmerizing, powerful. After the prayer, the elderly man approached them, offering condolences and assuring them that they had always been close to his father. He then told my uncle that they would stay in touch and assist him whenever needed. My uncle, determined to break free from this tradition, respectfully declined. He made it clear that he didn't want to be bound to anything or anyone. If they felt any obligation toward him or his family, he released them from it. The elderly figure simply smiled and replied, "That's not how these things work. We will remain in touch." Since then, my uncle has distanced himself from his father's work. Occasionally, he helps people with spiritual matters, but he never fully embraced his father's path. Now let me share a personal story. It was 2008, and I had recently completed my master's in astronomy. I was working as a lecturer in Scotland. That summer, near the end of June or the first week of July, we had a field trip planned. Coincidentally, a meteor shower was expected around the same dates, so our department organized a 3-day trip that included camping and hiking before we would observe the meteor shower. The location chosen was the Isle of Skye, a place known for its clear skies and breathtaking landscapes. Everything was well planned: tents, food supplies, and even dirt bikes for exploring the terrain. Local guides accompanied us. The first 2 days were amazing. We hiked, set up camp, and enjoyed the experience. On the second night, I stayed back while some of my colleagues went ahead to set up for stargazing. I planned to join them later. As I started walking toward them, I suddenly felt the atmosphere around me change. The air felt heavy, suffocating. A deep sense of unease washed over me. Something told me to turn back, but my legs wouldn't stop moving forward. In my mind, I kept telling myself, "Stop. Don't take another step. Just stop." But I couldn't. It felt like my body was moving on its own. Then I saw it. a dark figure floating in the air. From a distance, it looked like a shadow, but as I got closer, I could make out its features. It had an elongated face, a drooping mouth with what looked like overgrown mustache-like strands hanging down. Its skin was pale, almost glowing, and its eye sockets were empty. Just black voids. That's the last thing I remember, The next morning, I woke up inside my tent. As soon as I stepped out, everyone was staring at me. Some of my colleagues approached me, asking if I was okay. I felt weak, burning with a fever over 103 degrees Fahrenheit. One of my colleagues sat beside me and asked, "Do you remember what happened?" I shook my head, numbered just that I saw something. "What do you guys know?" He explained that when the group I was supposed to meet returned to camp, they realized I was missing. After searching for me unsuccessfully, the guides took out their dirt bikes and began an extensive search. 3 hours later, they found me lying on the shore, half of my body submerged in the freezing water. One of the guides, an elderly Scottish man, seemed disturbed. He told them he's seen something. But thankfully, whatever it was, it didn't attach itself to him. He'll be fine, but he needs to start praying. I wasn't particularly religious at the time, but after that incident, I made an effort to pray regularly. The fever lasted a few days, but eventually I recovered. To this day, I don't know what I saw that night, but whatever it was, I never want to see it again.